Right now, in the snow of northern China, a car is driving through minus 40 degrees Celsius cold on a battery made from salt. Not a prototype. A production sedan that an ordinary family can walk into a showroom and drive home. The battery inside it is built from an element so common it is dissolved in every ocean on Earth. The same stuff sitting in the shaker on your kitchen table. Sodium. An element the entire battery industry spent 30 years writing off as too cheap and too weak to ever matter. In February of 2026, in a town called Yakaishi, in the freezing far north of Inner Mongolia, the Chinese battery giant CATL and the automaker Chang'an put it on the road in a car called the Nevo A06. And the battery inside it does things that, by the textbook every engineer studied for 3 decades, it simply should not be able to do. It holds over 90% of its charge at minus 40 degrees Celsius, cold that would cripple a normal electric car. It survives more than 10,000 charges. And it is made from one of the most abundant materials on the entire planet. The headlines are calling it the world's first sodium-ion car. The truth is more interesting than the headline, and we will get to exactly why. But first, understand what you are looking at. For 30 years, sodium was the element you reached for when you could not afford the good stuff. The cheap seat, the compromise, the chemistry that always lost to lithium on the one number everyone cared about, which was how much energy you could pack into how little weight. And then it turned up under the floor of a real car, in the snow, doing the impossible. Once you understand what it actually took to get here, and why almost everyone in the field had given up on it, the scale of this stops being a spec sheet and starts being something you can feel. So here is the first question worth sitting with. Why would anyone bother? Why would a company spend a decade and over $1 billion fighting to make a battery that, on paper, was worse than the one it already sold by the millions? The answer is lithium. Or more precisely, the answer is where lithium comes from and how it behaves. To build a lithium battery, you need lithium, and usually cobalt and nickel, and a great deal of graphite. And almost none of that is spread evenly across the world. Roughly 3/4 of the world's mined lithium comes out of just 3 countries. Most of the world's cobalt comes from a single country, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And then there is the refining, the chemical step that turns raw rock into battery-grade material. China refines somewhere between 60 and 70% of the world's lithium, a similar share of its cobalt and nickel, and well over 90% of its graphite. One country sits in the middle of nearly every battery on Earth. That concentration would be uncomfortable enough on its own. But lithium does something else that makes engineers lose sleep. Its price does not move. It lurches. In late 2022, lithium carbonate spiked to around $80,000 per ton. Within roughly 2 years, it had crashed by nearly 90%. Then, by early 2026, it had more than doubled again from its lows. Imagine trying to plan a factory that will run for 20 years around a raw material whose price can swing tenfold and back inside a single product cycle. You cannot. And that uncertainty is baked into the cost of every electric car on the road.
Sodium offers a way out of all of it. There is no cobalt in it and no nickel. And sodium itself is not rare and not concentrated. It is the 6th most common element in the Earth's crust. If you scooped up a random handful of the ground beneath your feet, it would contain roughly 400 times more sodium than lithium. It is in the salt flats, in the soil, dissolved in every sea. No country can corner it. No cartel can squeeze it. That, and not energy density, is the prize. A battery whose raw materials nobody can hold hostage. So if the prize was that obvious, the next question is the one that defines this entire story. Why did it take 30 years? But first, that asterisk. Because here is the honest version of the headline. The Nevo A06 is not literally the first car ever to run on sodium. A couple of tiny sodium-powered city cars shipped quietly in China back in 2023, low-volume curiosities with the range of a long bike ride. What makes this one matter is not that it is first, it is that it is real. A full-size, nationally certified, mass-produced sedan, the moment sodium stopped being a science project and became something you can actually buy. That is the line that just got crossed. And to understand why it took 3 decades to cross it, you have to understand what was standing in the way. The first part of the answer is physics, and it is not flattering to sodium. A sodium ion is bigger than a lithium ion, and it is heavier, more than 3 times heavier atom for atom. In a battery, the ion is the thing that shuttles back and forth to store and release energy, so a bigger, heavier ion means a bigger, heavier battery for the same amount of power. Sodium also pushes its electrons with a little less force, which means a slightly lower voltage per cell. Add it all up, and a sodium battery has historically stored less energy and more weight than a lithium one. For a phone or a car where every kilogram of range matters, that looked like a dead end. But here's the thing. Lower energy density was a disadvantage, not a deal breaker. Engineers can design around weight. They build bigger packs, smarter shapes, lighter cars. If energy density had been the only problem, sodium would have arrived decades ago. It was not the only problem. And the real problem is the part of the story almost nobody talks about because it lives inside one specific component that the entire lithium industry is quietly built on. The anode. Every battery has 2 sides. When you charge it, ions pile into one side and wait. When you discharge it, they flood back across to the other. In a lithium battery, the side they pile into, the anode, is made of graphite, and graphite and lithium are a near-perfect marriage. Graphite is built from microscopic stacked sheets, like a deck of cards, and lithium ions are small enough to slide neatly between those sheets and tuck themselves away in enormous numbers. This one happy accident of chemistry is the foundation of the modern world. It is why your phone works. It is why electric cars exist. Now try to do the same thing with sodium. The sodium ion is too big. Slide it toward those same graphite sheets and it barely fits, and what does fit is unstable and falls apart. In graphite, sodium stores roughly 1/10 of what lithium does. Picture trying to slide a basketball into a slot designed for a tennis ball. It does not matter how hard you push. The slot is the wrong size. This is what killed sodium for 30 years, not the weight, the anode. Because to make sodium work, you could not simply swap one metal for another in an existing battery. You had to throw away graphite, the single most refined, most optimized, most heavily manufactured anode material on the planet, and invent a completely new one from scratch. And around the same time this problem became clear, in the early 1990s, a company called Sony commercialized the lithium-ion battery, and it worked brilliantly. The money, the factories, the research, all of it flooded toward lithium. Sodium was left on the lab bench. For most of a generation, it stayed there. So the question that the Nevo A06 silently answers is this: what changed? What did CATL and the researchers before them actually crack to drag this chemistry off the bench and into a car you can buy? The breakthrough is a material called hard carbon. If graphite is a neat, orderly deck of cards, hard carbon is the opposite. It is a deliberately messy, disordered carbon, full of tiny pores and tangled, jumbled layers. And that mess is the point. Sodium ions cannot slot neatly into order, but they can settle into chaos. They lodge in the nanoscale pores, cling to the tangled surfaces, and fill the gaps in ways the tidy structure of graphite never allowed. Hard carbon gave the oversized sodium ion somewhere to live. It is the single most important reason sodium is in a car today. On the other side of the battery, the cathode, engineers swapped lithium's materials for a layered oxide built around sodium, a structure designed specifically to hand sodium ions back and forth without crumbling over thousands of cycles. And then there is a detail that sounds small and is actually beautiful. In a lithium battery, one side has to use copper foil as its backbone because lithium reacts badly with aluminum. Sodium does not react with aluminum, so sodium batteries can use thin aluminum foil on both sides instead of heavy, expensive copper. Aluminum is lighter, it is far cheaper, and it shaves cost out of the cell at the level of the raw bill of materials. None of this was easy to scale. CATL has said that getting Naxtra from a working idea to a real production line meant solving a stack of brutal manufacturing problems in 2025 alone, including controlling moisture down to almost nothing, stopping the hard carbon from generating unwanted gas, and getting that aluminum foil to bond properly. These are not glamorous problems. They are the difference between a press release and a product. And clearing them is why this is the part of the story that matters most. If you are finding this as fascinating as I did when I dug into it, subscribe to the channel. We are about to get into the numbers that make this thing genuinely hard to believe. Because once you accept that the chemistry works, the specifications start to read like a wish list. Start with the cold, which is where this battery embarrasses lithium most. Minus 40 degrees Celsius is not a thought experiment. It is the temperature where exposed skin can freeze in minutes, the kind of cold that settles over northern China, Canada, and Scandinavia every winter. And it is the temperature where a normal lithium electric car suffers, sometimes losing close to half its usable range as the chemistry inside slows to a crawl. CATL says its Naxtra battery holds on to more than 90% of its capacity at that same minus 40 degrees, and keeps delivering stable power down toward minus 50. If that holds up in independent winter testing, and that is a claim worth verifying rather than taking on faith, it does not just match lithium in the cold. It operates in a different league entirely. An electric car that does not fear winter is a new product in large parts of the world. Then there is lifespan. CATL rates the Naxtra cell at over 10,000 charge cycles. Sit with that number. If you fully charged and drained this battery every single day, it would take more than 27 years to reach 10,000 cycles. The battery would almost certainly outlive the car wrapped around it. Then there is safety, and here the claim comes with something stronger than a marketing line. In September of 2025, the Naxtra battery became the world's first sodium-ion battery to pass China's new National Battery Safety Standard, a tough certification tested by the country's official automotive research center. That standard demands a cell survive being crushed, drilled, and otherwise abused without catching fire. This is not CATL grading its own homework. It is a certification on file with China's National Testing Authority. That detail matters because trust in a battery is everything, and an independent stamp is worth more than any number a company prints on a slide. And the energy density, the very weakness that doomed sodium for 3 decades? CATL got the Naxtra cell to roughly 175 watt-hours per kilogram. That is not a typo, and it is the part that should make you sit up, because that figure is now essentially level with lithium iron phosphate, the workhorse lithium chemistry that powers a huge share of the world's affordable electric cars. The gap that defined the entire argument against sodium, the gap everyone treated as permanent, has very nearly closed. Put all of it together. A battery with the energy density of mainstream lithium, that laughs at deep cold, that lasts tens of thousands of cycles, that passes the strictest safety test in the industry, and that is built from a material roughly 400 times more abundant than the one it replaces. That is the package now sitting under the floor of a 45 kilowatt-hour family sedan with a range of over 400 kilometers on China's testing cycle. The textbook said this combination was impossible. The textbook is now out of date. So how did we get from a dead end on a lab bench to a certified car? And here is the part that should actually unsettle the rest of the world. While CATL was quietly solving this, the West's two best attempts at the exact same future were going bankrupt. CATL started serious sodium research back in 2016, while almost everyone else still treated the chemistry as a curiosity. It showed a first cell in 2021, went quiet for a couple of years when crashing lithium prices made sodium look pointless, then launched the Naxtra battery in 2025, earned the safety certification by that September, and had it in a production car by February of 2026. From abandoned idea to showroom floor, the final sprint took under a year. Now, hold that against what happened everywhere else. In Europe, Northvolt, the company that was supposed to be the continent's answer to Asian batteries, collapsed into the largest industrial bankruptcy in modern Swedish history in early 2025, having reached only a tiny fraction of its target. In the United States, a sodium-ion specialist called Natron Energy, which had opened the country's first commercial sodium production and announced plans for a gigafactory, ran out of money and shut down in September of 2025. Two of the West's most promising attempts to build this exact technology closed their doors in the same year China put it in a car. And this is where the story stops being about a battery at all. Because it is tempting to watch a launch like this and file it under another impressive Chinese product, a clever sell, a sharp price, a good news cycle. That reading misses the actual achievement, and the actual achievement is much harder to copy than any single battery. The real achievement is the system that produced it. Consider what CATL poured into sodium alone. The company has said it spent close to 10 billion yuan, roughly $1.5 billion, on sodium-ion research. It built nearly 300,000 experimental test cells, a number that tells you this was not a handful of scientists guessing, but an industrial-scale search, grinding through version after version until the chemistry surrendered. It assigned hundreds of researchers to the problem. And all of that sat inside a company that is, by a wide margin, the largest battery maker on Earth, holding close to 40% of the entire global market, spending over $3 billion a year on research across all its projects, and holding tens of thousands of patents. That is the thing the West could not match in 2025. Not the idea of a sodium battery. Everyone had the idea. The papers were public. The chemistry was understood. What CATL had that Northvolt and Natron did not was the full chain, the research muscle, the test cell volume, the manufacturing know-how, and the financial staying power to ride out the years when lithium got cheap and sodium looked pointless. They did not just invent a cell. They built the machine that can take a dead idea, drag it through hundreds of thousands of failed prototypes, and deliver it to a certified production line while better-funded rivals run out of road. That is the invisible achievement here, not the battery, the readiness, the capability to do this on demand, again and again, faster than anyone else can react. So what happens next? CATL has said sodium is not a niche. It is planning future versions reaching 500 to 600 kilometers of range, enough to cover the needs of more than half the car market. It is building 40 gigawatt hours of dedicated sodium-ion capacity. It is rolling sodium into grid storage and into thousands of battery swap stations, especially in the cold northern cities where the technology shines. And Chang'an has named CATL its exclusive sodium partner across its entire range of brands. But it is worth being clear-eyed because this is where the honest version of the story matters most. Sodium has not won yet, and it is not even cheaper than lithium today. Right now, at the small scale it is produced, a sodium cell actually costs slightly more per kilowatt hour than the cheapest lithium one. Independent analysts at Wood Mackenzie put sodium at around $59 per kilowatt hour in 2025 against $52 for lithium iron phosphate, and they do not expect true price parity for years. Sodium's cost advantage is real, but it is structural and it is in the future. It comes from abundant raw materials, from aluminum replacing copper, from no cobalt and no nickel. It arrives only once production scales up massively, and the price of those abundant materials finally shows up in the finished cell. Anyone telling you sodium is already dirt cheap is selling you a slide, not a fact. Which brings us back to the title everyone reaches for, the end of the lithium age. And the truth is more interesting than the slogan. This is not the end of lithium. Lithium is still lighter, still denser, still better for the long-range performance cars where every kilogram counts. What just ended is lithium's monopoly. For 30 years, there was one serious chemistry, and one set of countries that controlled it, and one volatile price that everyone had to live with. Now there are two. A heavy, abundant, weatherproof, cobalt-free option for the affordable cars, the cold climates, and the vast grid batteries the energy transition will need by the billion. And the expensive, concentrated, lighter option for everything else. The element that spent 30 years on the lab bench, dismissed as the cheap seat, is now sitting under a real car in the snow of Inner Mongolia, holding 90% of its charge in cold that would cripple the chemistry that beat it. CATL began the serious work in 2016. It will mass-produce these cells through 2026 and beyond. And by the time the rest of the world has finished arguing about whether sodium matters, the factories will already be running. If this changed how you see what is actually coming for the cars and the grid, subscribe. There is a lot more to show you.